Hello everyone. So today we're covering my build for the next upcoming patch, 3.26. As you can see from the screen, it's Herald of Agony Necromancer. Now we've been 3 seconds roughly into the video, and I know you're screaming, oh my god, where's the gameplay? Where's the playing? I cannot see the gameplay. I'm a monkey. I need to see big shooting stars, moving things, arrows moving. And this is why here I'm showing gameplay. This is footage from me playtesting this build. I'm doing a tier 6 map at level 71. I'm level 72, and you might be able to see in the corner I have still 1 skill points left, and we are easily clearing a tier 6 with no gear, absolutely 0 gear. In fact, I have so little gear that I forgot to put my rings on, so I'm actually playing without rings. We haven't leveled our gems in any way. We haven't spent any money. This is just yellow shitty gear that I've picked up on the ground, and as you can see, we're clearing just fine. So I will be presenting my build, and this is my league starter for the next season, unless something very big still drops even after the patch notes, I guess. And I have decided once again to present everything you need to know about this build in the most captivating way possible, and it is of course a PowerPoint presentation. So let's move on to my slides. Just a quick recap of everything that we will go over in this build. So here's my table of contents. First of all, we'll start with a patch recap. So what's different from us, what has changed. If you already know everything about this build and you just want to know like what's new for it, this is just the only section that you actually need to watch. Everything else is basically explaining it for people who are new to the build. So then we will go over what the build does, like the general idea. I will give you a hopefully very honest list of pros and cons. And then we will go over the mechanics, so how do we actually function. And then we will see a simulation of a 35 Divines budget. You will see basically what are we spending our money on. This is mostly so you can judge if I'm being honest with my prices, and if this is something that you feel you can actually replicate in your experience, I guess. And then we will go over the path of building. This will be the longest part of the video, and this is basically what I'm most proud of. This build has been both incredible, but it has had one major flaw in that the guy who is, let's say, responsible for keeping up the build updated, he has made one of the most confusing POBs I've ever seen, where it's basically totally unclear what are like upgrades, how you should transition from one setup to the next. Basically how you're supposed to scale in the late game, and this is a very finicky and complicated build in that he has a lot of moving parts and everything needs to function properly in order for the build to be viable. So what I've done, basically, this is my main contribution, I guess, to the community. I've made one very big and detailed POB where I go over every single stage of the build from level 1 basically to a strong endgame setup. I'm deliberately basically ending it not at the super juiced endgame POB where you're doing 150 million DPS with like immortal status, mainly because if you reach the last stage of my setup, I feel like you will understand the game and the build well enough that you can then consult the maze-like POB that the main guy has done and basically improve from there. And then I will go over a couple of more of alternatives and other items, other gems, other stuff you can use. Basically, this is my experience with the build, like a little bit of like tips and tricks I've come up with over time, and then I will give you my conclusions. All right, so what's new? Actually, nothing. Nothing is new for us. All of our gems have been left untouched. We are exactly as strong as we were before, which is great news, as a bunch of meta stuff has got nerfed. So yeah, no real changes here. Like, we were good before, we will still be good now. Slow, like tiny differences. The 2 golems, Stone Golem and Chaos Golem, I guess, got their passive bonus reworked. And now the Stone Golem is a very strong defensive option because it gives us 20% more, or I guess increase the global defenses. And you'll see later we scale a lot of them. So this is actually a big chunk of DPI, of survivability. And the Chaos Golem like improves Wither, which we also use to quite a great degree. So yeah, so they might be used. There's a version of the endgame setup where we're running Svalin and we can socket them there to keep resummoning them, so they'll be up most of the times, I guess. And then I said maybe borrow power is good for us. This is because we're getting in lieu of the enchantments from settlers, which we couldn't use anyway because we're running a unique weapon. We are getting these kind of runes that can substitute masteries. I haven't seen anything in the revealed trailer so far that seemed good for us, but there might be something good for us. In which case we can use them, and maybe they're good. And then the mercenaries are probably very good on us. So, as you may know, basically we are getting mercenaries which work like a middle point between the ones in Diablo 4 and what would be another example, I guess? Well, the one in Diablo 3, I guess. So there are going to be guys following you around, helping you, and they said that they're like intending them to be somewhat competitive with actual player builds. If that's the case, the reason I said they're likely good is because we are like, it's very easy for us to sacrifice damage to get a lot more survivability, and vice versa, basically. So if the damage mercenary are really good and can keep up with us, we can basically cut our damage by a good chunk and become extremely tanky. And if the survivability or our bots, I guess, mercenaries are really good and they provide a lot of survivability, we can just go full glass cannon and reach some truly insane amount of DPS. So yeah, to cut it short, maybe we're going using one or two golems. Maybe the borrow power are good for us. If some are, I will make a video on it. And whatever mercenaries are, we can probably find a use for them. So what actually is the build? As you can see, if you look at this beauty here, we're running Herald of Agony, which is a buff, basically, that reserves mana to gives us chance to poison. And whenever we do poison, we get stacks of virulence. As long as we have stacks of virulence, we will summon the Agony Crawler, which is the actual minion, which is an invincible minion that cannot taunt, and it does a bunch of damage. And this is where, like, we see why we are so good at mid-budget, because we can scale damage pretty much exclusively off of gem levels for Herald of Agony. If you look at the last lines here, the Herald of Agony gets increased attack speed per virulence, increase the physical damage per virulence, and the flat damage per virulence. So this gem scales absurdly high with levels. If we do some math, this is just a basic gem with nothing, no quality, nothing else. A level 1 with just one stack. As you can see, no damage. Basically, 2 base damage with 2% increased attack speed and 5% damage increase. But at level 20 with 40 stacks, not only are we getting a decent base for damage, with almost like 2.6k average rate, I guess, but we're also getting a massive 160% attack speed increase and a massive 260% damage increase. And bear in mind that this is the bare minimum from our gem, with no quality, no extra levels, nothing, and we will scale this much higher. So moving on to our list of positives and negatives, let's start with the pros. So I've called this build the king of mid-budgets, and this is the reason why. So basically, in the 20 to 60 divines range, you're getting a massive amount of power, both survivability-wise and damage-wise. Power Siphon of the Archmage used to be one of the best, like, I would say, starter cheapish build, I guess. And for 20 divines, they get to like, I don't know, 5 million damage. We easily get to 30 plus, while also being tanky. It's also got virtually no meta items, so everything is cheap. I say relatively because we're also doing a bunch of cluster jewels, so that might get somewhat expensive, but we're not competing for everything. The most meta items we're using is currently Aegis Aurora, which usually goes for, I don't know, 1.5 divines, I guess, something like that. So we're also a minion build that's not running Animate Guardian or Spectres, so you don't waste money on death. This is, of course, now slightly less relevant in 3.26, as Animate Guardian no longer drops his gear when he dies. So, but this has become like so I've listed it as a pro here because this has been historically true. But there are now new pros of not like supporting Animate Guardian, and that is we're not having to buy like a Kingsmaker that's gonna cost 40 divines, since everything that can run Animate Guardian will probably want to run Animate Guardian. So we don't run neither of those, so no shitty buying of Spectres, and I guess no longer Animate Guardian dying. We're also very flexible when it comes to the content we can do. We can do everything but Sanctum, and actually also Sanctum is doable as well. You'll have to use the Stormburst setup to be able to be ranged, I guess. It's just not very good at Sanctum, I guess, so I wouldn't recommend it really. Mostly because we are expecting to tank everything and not really dodge stuff. So that doesn't lend itself too well to doing Sanctum, of course. We're also uber viable. We can do all uber bosses. And once again, we can do them in the 20 to 60 divines range. And we're also very flexible. So in my own POB, I've provided like 2 separate way of building the build itself, but there are like dozens of them. I'm also like presupposing Necromancer because, come on, it's a minion build, of course you're running Necromancer. But this build can also be replicated on virtually every ascendancy that has like defensive nodes. So you can go Pathfinder, Champion, Juggernaut, Guardian also, like virtually, like if it exists in Trickster as well, like if it exists and it has defenses, it can run the build because we don't really need any scaling from our ascendancy itself. Now moving on to the negatives, like okay, you might have seen my first line and let me explain it a bit. When I say that this is worse than all other builds, what I mean is that for every kind of content that you're intending to do, there is always going to be a build that is significantly better than you at that content. Like, do you want to speed farm maps? Something like, I don't know, Lightning Arrow, Tornado Shot, whatever the bow meta build of the season is going to be, like that's gonna like zoom way faster than you. Same if you wanted to do like, I don't know, Heist or something with no DPS and just movement speed, like you're gonna be worse than Heist runners. We have AoE, but we don't have infinite AoE, so stuff that spawns like 1 million monsters we're not really great at. So like dedicated, I don't know, Blight or Expedition builds are going to be better than that. So yeah, we're kind of a jack of all trades, the master of none, basically. Then we're running pretty much all uniques in every slot. So one of the ways where good players can really shine in Path of Exile is crafting your own items. This is a massive like money saver. You can't really craft uniques, so what can you do? Then we're still a minion build, so you know what that means. Like the Herald of Agony gets stuck behind doors, it does not want to target appropriately. Maybe you will leave stuff alive to start shooting other stuff. If there are like temporal shields or bubbles, he has to be inside or outside. Like he will not do that automatically. You know, it's a minion. We are running Convocation, so we can fix most of this AI. But this also means that we are running Convocation, so we have less sockets. Then my next point, I guess it kind of like it's almost like tautological given the first one, but. Yes, since there are always better builds than us at all kind of contents, we're not particularly good at any kind of contents. I think the biggest, like one of the ones that we are best at, besides bossing, we are a pretty decent bosser build, in that we can arrive at the boss still alive and then kill it quite fast. I think we're pretty decent at like both ultimatums and ritual. Because like the closed arena means that the Herald of Agony always has targets, so it doesn't waste time like walking around, and its stacks are always high, so it always does max damage. So yeah, that's pretty good. But once again, of course, there are better both ultimatums and ritual builds. So basically, yeah, you're not gonna feel like, oh, this is absolutely great at this stuff. You're always gonna feel like, yeah, I can do it, and it's fine. It's also an incredibly clunky build. So just to list off a bunch of stuff that we need. We need a lot of attributes of different kind, and we need them from a witch starting position. So we need strength and dexterity, and we got none from basically our default starting position. We are stacking auras, so we need a lot of mana reservation. We also need resistances. We also need a bunch of defensive layers, and we're running all uniques. So there are very limited opportunities for us to fix the stuff we were missing from our gear, basically. So we are like we are always gonna be like basically on the razor's edge of just having enough to make stuff work. And my last cons, this might not necessarily be like a negative to you if you like doing this stuff, but basically we are respecing and transitioning a lot to go from our level 1 setup to our endgame setups. Spoiler, I guess, in the endgame, we are running Chaos Inoculation, full energy shield, but this is not something that can be sustained early. So in order to reach that point, we're going to need to have a life start where we're building life and life gain on it and a bunch of other stuff. And then, of course, all of the stuff is going to be totally irrelevant as soon as we switch to cast inoculation, as we are not going to have any more life. And so we're going to have to basically restructure our entire build. I don't think there is any way around that. We basically, life versions of this build were made temporarily viable in the ultra endgame by the Thresha Ascendancy. And unfortunately, despite my wet dream, they haven't give us that back. So we're still having to make it work with Necromancer, I guess. But once again, if you enjoy that stuff, if you enjoy the fact that the build is complicated and you get to tinker with like a lot of moving parts and changing stuff around, and there's a part of the build where we basically start to externalize all of our stats, all of our attributes, everything to cluster jewels. Like if you do enjoy that kind of like, I don't know, like, do you know when you're like loading a car and you have to make all the luggage like perfectly knit together so everything fits? Yeah, if you like doing that kind of stuff, this is also like the biggest pros of the build. But I'm gonna assume that most people don't. So yeah, so that's my list. So how does the build actually function? Let's go over our main mechanics. So first of all, we're an aura stacker. As you can see, we're running a bunch of auras. Specifically, well, the Herald of Agony itself, even though it's not listed as an aura, it is an aura. We're also running Determination, Grace, and Discipline. So basically all 3 layers of defenses. So armor, energy shield, and evasion rating. And sometimes we're also running Clarity too. So everything that scales with aura, numbers of auras effects, this is all good for us. And then we are mostly scaling through the level of gems. So we've talked about this before, but if you can see, like now that it's bigger on the screen, the Agony Crawler scales all different kind of axes through the gem level itself. So in order to do damage in PoE, you want like a big base of damage, then that gets multiplied by a big increase, which then gets applied faster. And we get all 3 of these through the gem itself. So basically we are just getting more and more and more and more levels of the gem. In the end game setup, so we're aiming for level 34, but even level 40 is possible, and it keeps getting better and better and better the more you level it up. We also, so our main mechanics, there are like 2 separate ways of doing this. We're either going Cyclone with castable channeling, the CWC means. So we are spinning around, and since as long as we spin, we keep launching spells, and the spell is poison, so we get stacks that way. Or we spam projectiles with a bow, and like that projectile is poison, and we get stack through that. So that's how it works. Okay, now let's go over 35 Divines budget. So this is what it's like you're supposed to get for your money. Once again, like you might think I've been too stingy with the prices. Maybe I've set them deliberately too low to make the build look better than it actually is. But I guess now you can check how I've made my math. So the first big spend is our 20 Divines of clusters. This is because all our damage comes from the pure Agony notable. You can see there on the screen, which increases the maximum number of virulence. Just a reminder, virulence is the stacks that the Herald of Agony has. So you're, 80 damage per stack. This is the amount of stacks. So we want to get as many of them as physically possible. So we are running voices, large clusters, to support like multiple medium clusters. So I've set 20 Divines here. This is because you can get very cheap ones for, 5 Divines total. And then you're going to need to get better and better ones, because we're also looking not only for the notable, but for the small passives that those provide. Since they will be the vast majority of our attributes, of our resistances, of our energy shield also, you can get it there. Yeah. So we're at 20 Divines. 21.5 Aegis Aurora. So this is our big endgame survivability option. You get 2% of armor when you block. In the endgame setup I provided, that's supposed to be at around 20 Divines or something, even slightly less than that maybe. We're getting back 350 shield every block. So that's most of our energy shield recharge first, before we get like a Watcher's Eye with energy shield recharge and stuff like that. So yeah, basically Aegis Aurora is the moment you start actually being very tanky. And we're also running alternative Valen. I've used Aegis Aurora here for my calculation, as I think it's also better early. So yeah. Next, we're spending 2 divines on a Skin of the Lords. You might think that this is too little or too much. So we like a lot of the keystone passives that Skin of the Lords provides. Just listing them up on the top of my head, we like Ghost Dance, we like Divine Shield, we like Resolute Technique, we like a bunch of stuff basically. And we also very flexible in the color of our sockets. So we're running a mix of all 3, and the only like 2 truly mandatory ones are the Herald of Agony itself, and Empower and Pierce, as otherwise the AoE is kind of shit. So basically, yeah, 3 sockets, like 2 green, 1 blue, and everything else can be basically any color, and we can kind of make it work. So there are a lot of Skin of the Lords that will be compatible with our setup, and thus hopefully we can find a cheap one. Okay, then our entire Flask setup. I've set 2 divines here because I really think Flask are underrated, and the amount of power you get from a nicely rolled gain 2 charges on being hit and another useful increased effect cannot be understated. This is if you can get almost perma uptime, this is basically already having your Mage Blood, so it's worth investing a bit into them. Okay, then we're also running Amunamus Gaze. This is a unique jewel that gives +6 to damage over time multiplier per Ghastly Eye jewel. We're running potentially up to 9 of them, including the Amunamus, so we're getting the max benefits here. And since eventually we will give the Herald of Agony a chance to poison, and it will poison, and it will poison with a very big average hit. So this is a nice damage multiplier, but it's quite expensive, so 2 divines. Okay, then we're also running one of our rare piece is a helmet with +2 to minion skills, which also has mana reservation, by the way. This is why it's so expensive. I think that the bases go for 2 divines, not the first day of the league, of course, but you're also not needing this the first day of the league. If you buy them after all the sweats have already farmed a good amount, I think you should be able to kind of make this work. Maybe 3.5 is a bit optimistic, and maybe you do get a +1 to level of minion skills, which is of course a bit worse, but it's fine. And then you get an okayish Watcher's Eye, by which I mean a Watcher's Eye that has 2 useful modifiers. That might seem a lot. That might seem like a perfect Watcher's Eye, but do bear in mind that we're running 4 auras. So the amount of the combination of modifiers that are good on us are there's a lot of them basically. So we like a lot of the Watcher's Eye. The only mandatory, I guess, ones is that you need one that improves your energy shield recharge, because that's also a big chunk of your survivability later on. And finally, I've set 2 divines as our budget for rare gems, so we're running both Empower and Enlighten. At least initially, we're then dropping Enlighten, but we need it at the beginning. And we're also running 3 Awakened gems, I think. You might think that 2 divines is a bit low for that. However, do bear in mind that since basically we get plus levels to gems from our other pieces of gear, we can we can get shitty versions of the Awakened gems, like a corrupted Awakened gem that's level 3. So that's a terrible gem, because you can never get it to level 5. And so people will sell it for cheaper because they cannot use it. It's just, 2% more damage compared to the non-Awakened version. But we can make it work because with our plus levels, we will get level 5 and we will get the bonus. So yeah, that's our budget, and that's pretty much an endgame build already. Maybe you spend a little bit less on cluster jewels, and you include here also the amulet, what is it, Ashes of the Star, that gives +1 levels, and that's still 35 divines, or maybe 37, I guess. And that's basically an Uber bosser, I guess, for an Uber bosser that can also map, and he's on sheet and map him, and yeah, so that's great, I guess. Or not, I guess. I am sure that's great. Find me a better build than this for this budget. along back. So let's go on to our path of building. This is my main contribution, as I said, to the video. So if you're a new player, by the way, well, first of all, I have a massive notes section here with patch recap and everything that you need to do act by act up until the very, very end game. This is a massive amount of information, and if you're tired of listening to Yap, you can just skip there. Also, if you're a new player, here in the top right corner of path of building, you can select loadouts. This will automatically select the tree, the skill points, the gems that we're using, whatever you might need. So that's a very convenient way of like navigating through it. So let's quickly go over basically every step of the way. So Act 1, you start on the beach, you're wet and tired, you grab a bunch of stuff here, like random points, a bit of elemental resistances here, also just the ignore stuns. If you get perma-stunned, you die, so this is one of the only ways of dying very early on. And you path towards this first minion wheel. As far as our gems are concerned, this is the standard way of leveling witch, basically. I don't really like it. In fact, I advise you switch out as soon as possible to some Raging Spirit, melee splash and minion damage. You cannot, if you just have a 2-link, you'll add the minion damage later on. And this is pretty decent. It's also very laid back, as you get to stand in the back, hold right click, and they kill everything for you. And as far as your auras are concerned, you just grab Vitality and Clarity. This is free sustain, it's pretty good. You don't really need to optimize this setup. I haven't even provided any items because it doesn't matter. Just find stuff that like gives you the right color sockets and you're done, basically. It's just the first couple of acts also. So then we move on to Act 2. You finish this wheel. You can also take the point here for 250 accuracy rating. And you start moving along this way. There's a bunch of good stuff here. Minion damage, more minion damage, whatever, some stats, some cast speed, good stuff. But nothing really changes in Act 2. The only thing that you really should start looking out for in Act 2 are bows and gear that has multiple green sockets, as you will need those to transition later on. So finally, in Act 3, there's a zone in Act 3 called the Library. If you reach that zone and you clear it out, you unlock basically a merchant that sells most of the gems in the game. And this is where we begin prepping our actual transition to the endgame build. Also, do note that I've taken this alacrity node. We will be needing a bunch of dexterity in the end game and a bunch of strength. And of course, our starting position is in the middle of the intersection. So we get no dexterity and no strength. This is why I'm taking all these big nodes. And basically, we will be progressively externalizing all of our attributes to the tree. So if you look at the skills, I've given you the Herald of Agony transition, so this is our first setup. Honestly, you can switch any of these damage supports for any other supports, basically, that are in the end game versions. They're all fine. Like you don't need Pierce during the campaign because packs are not big enough to necessitate Pierce. Do bear in mind that here the level is set to 4. This is very intentional. Herald of Agony is absolutely garbage at level 1. I can even show you live. I can decrease the level to 1, and I pointed this out already, but 1 to 3 added physical damage is shit. It's absolutely terrible. 3 to 6 is like, well, 3 times better, I guess. This is like a massive DPS boost in just a couple of levels. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna put the sockets in your second and in your second weapon set. You can have 2 different sets of weapons, by the way, and they still get experience, even if you're not currently using them, as long as they're equipped. So you level it up to level 3 or 4, and then you're gonna switch. And here I've given you 3 separate ways of inflicting poison. The first one, brands, is only, I consider it only a temporary solution. If you have not managed to grab a bow or a melee weapon that's good enough and a shield that's good enough to do the other 2 transitions, because as you can see here, the 2 setups I've supported are Cyclone and Bow. you actually do kind of like go back to Stormbrand in the ultra end game for like a single target, but you don't need to worry about that. Basically, this is just like a desperate measure if you cannot find anything else. So for Cyclone, you're gonna want a 4-link to green to blue. This is why I also recommend starting bow, by the way, because this is also harder to set up, and probably by the end of Act 3 you're not gonna have 2 green and 2 blue. And for the bow, you just need the 3 green sockets with Storm Rain, lesser multiple projectiles, and chance to poison. Ignore the levels here, they don't matter at all. And when you've got this ready, you can transition to the actual build. So you'll have this plus the Herald of Agony. By the way, I've also put flammability here because you get it as a quest reward, and it's nice as up to the point where you're still using some Raging Spirits. And looking at the tree, we just go forward. And same for Act 4. We finish this wheel for more chance to poison with spells. This is not immediately relevant if you're using bow, as they're not spells. But whatever, you're gonna take it anyway later on. And you start grabbing a bunch of life here, so we got a bit tonky. And then we move on to the other big minion damage wheel. And now let us discuss briefly. So from the setup from this point onward, the build is split in two up until the late maps. So for all these sections, you can either go Cyclone or Bow. I don't think there's a clear winner here. By the way, in my notes, I do give you all the pros and cons of playing one versus the other. But to cut it short, Cyclone is more damage, but less tanky. At least at the beginning, while Bow is much safer but has less damage overall. Like if you want a quick comparison, in like this is Act 5 to 10. This is basically what I expect you to have at the end of the campaign. The Bow version reaches almost 100k DPS. That's pretty decent in order to enter maps. And the second version is over 160, so like 40% more DPS or something. And this disparity is also kept later on, where during maps, Cyclone gets up to 800k, and the Bow struggles to reach 500k. So, do bear it in mind. So suppose you're going Bow, which is what I actually recommend. And also, this DPS is probably actually going to be higher than that, because I don't think it's correctly calculating spiritual aid here, because we get a bunch of like minion damage increase. Oh, and also because I have my endgame bows equipped, which you're not actually gonna have. You're not gonna have this bow. It greatly reduces the damage you personally deal, but you're not gonna have that during your campaign. You're actually gonna have like a standard yellow bow, which is actually gonna do much more damage with your actual spells. So your DPS here is probably higher than this. Anyway, there's a massive jump, as you can see here, from the Act 4 setup to 5 to 10. This is because I don't really care in which order you end up taking the points. Like, you can flip like first the right side, then the left side. You can respec from here immediately and go up and grab this wheel. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, the build carries itself up to the end of the campaign. And I think we're coming out of the campaign extremely strong. Like, first of all, we are res capped with very minimal gear. I have a couple of resistances here from a gear, but I'm also like overcapped massively. So you cannot have like basically one of these pieces. There is no resistances, for instance, on my chest. On my helmet, or my chest either. Like, yeah, you're gonna end up out of the campaign with like pretty much capped res. And an absurd sustain through our Thief's Torment, because we're getting back 50 life per enemy hit with attacks, and we are spamming a lot of attacks. Our setup, we are still proccing Storm Rain through our main weapon, and then we are using Mana Forged Arrow, which will cast other arrow skills automatically as we spend mana on our main setup, and they will add Ensnaring Arrow and Feeding Frenzy, for instance, more of arrows to inflict more poison stacks. So you know, and that's kind of the setup initially. So basically we spam a bunch of projectiles, they poison, and then as they poison, we get stacks for the Herald of Agony itself. Nothing really too crazy to see here. We're running this chest, then in maps, mostly because of the socketed gems are supported by level 15 peers, so a 4 link on this chest is pretty much a 5 link on any other chest, so you can get it, and it's also an absolutely common drop, so you're probably gonna drop it yourself, and you can very easily 4 link it, and then you basically have a 5 link for free. And then we move on to maps. Here we start seeing the cluster jewels take over that I've told you from before. So we start having our first cluster jewels for more virulence. And that's pretty much the only defensive difference there is. I don't even think there's much difference here in items. The only real difference is here if we consider the switching to Widow Hail with our rear guard quiver to get a lot of block chance and spell block chance, which makes us actually significantly more tanky than proposed here. Like it's given like a shitty max hit and a shitty elemental hit, but you do have to consider that we're blocking most of our stuff. We are spell suppression capped. So yeah, you're actually gonna be absolutely fine. Like you've seen me level through maps absolutely fine. We have a massive region through our mana gain on it, life gain on it, and we're still like, this is supposed level 83. You can get a couple more levels, you maybe drop this, and you grab all of our spell suppression nodes from here. Like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. But yeah, but this is gonna be absolutely enough for like early red maps or whatever. Also, in my skills, I'm not using where is it? I'm not using for instance what's the word for it, molten shell or steel skin here, even though we're using only a 5 link here in my chest. We could have a 6 unlinked socket and use it there for way more survivability. And then eventually in the later maps, I basically at this point I expect to swap to Cyclone. This is where we now get to cap our block chance, so we get to employ a good chunk of spell suppression chance. We do actually run here our molten shell. I think it should be somewhere. Oh, no, we're actually automating steel skin yet because we don't have much armor still. We get our determination through our free aura via Guardian's Blessing. So yeah, we got a bit more tanky, we got significantly way more DPS. This is still, also do consider, this is still like zero chaos items basically. Like this ring is 1 chaos, these boots are 1 chaos, the chest is 1 chaos, and then we have random shitty rares that do nothing. Like this is absolutely random stuff, like a bunch of strength. I don't even think we need this extra strength. You can actually take it out and just get it from here instead of here. Like basically it's a bunch of random stuff that you can throw on for very cheap, and this is absolutely pretty respectable single target DPS, by the way. And then in this setup you're gonna basically wait quite a bit, accumulate resources, get stronger and stronger and stronger, and eventually you'll be able to afford your Chaos Inoculation swap. And this is where the build actually starts to shine. As you can see, our elemental resistance is skyrockets, our DPS absolutely explodes, we get better max resistances, better physical resistance, we get like a bigger life pool as our energy shield is almost at 4k. And at this point we are proper endgame beast. We now have automation dedication while molten shell, by the way, which we can use. This is why I have molten shell enabled, because you're gonna have it like constantly proc through automation and convocation, but then you're also gonna have the oh shit button of while molten shell, and same for determination, so discipline for while discipline. Still a lot of unreserved mana, so it's gonna be fine mana-wise. And you get a bunch of mana regen from your jewels, so you don't run out of mana. And still no expensive items. By the way, on this version, we're running Skin of the Loyal, not Lords, so this is under 1 divine by the time you reach this point. This is like a 10 chaos amulet or something. This is Aegis Aurora, the actual expensive items that we're running. And then this is like 50 chaos or something. The gloves are 20 chaos. Like there is no... And Ashes of the Star actually is an expensive item. It's just another 2 divines. So we're looking like 6 divines of gears over there, plus the clusters. This is why I said like under 20 divines. This is probably like 15 or something divines. And I mean, we're getting a stupid amount of damage. Such that if you see my late maps version, I've dropped 2 clusters here to get more defensive stuff, like the spell suppression wield over there. It will probably be better in the cast inoculation to do the same, where you can drop 2 of these, be above 20 millions, and then you actually, I don't know, you grab some endurance charges on it, or maybe instead of one of these jewels, you grab the small cluster that gives endurance charges. You go over here, you grab a more energy shield from this and more max lightning resistance. Like there's a bunch of like points that you can take out a bit of DPS to get more survivability somewhere else. And then I've included one actual endgame build where we get 20k fizz and 70k max, and we get a massive 50 million DPS. This also has insane regen through because we are evading 70% of the time, we are getting 80% physical reduction, we are spell blocking pretty much always, we have 100% spell suppression, like and this is probably I don't know, an 85 to 100 divines kind of build basically, which I think is pretty good. For Watcher's Eye, we are getting a massive amount of energy shield recharge, or actually I think in this setup I don't even include it probably. Oh no, I do include it, yeah. 29 energy shield per enemy hit while affected by discipline. We're gonna be hitting enemies a lot, so this is gonna be a massive energy shield recharge. And yeah, Fashion Flame or whatever. So I think that's it for the POB section. So here's a bunch of other items and stuffs and ideas that I haven't included directly. This is more for like experienced players, so if you're new you can ignore all of this. You can go for mage build setups. We don't really benefit from a Hunter. I think mage build is much better on us. Other alternatives are absolutely fine, like Graven's Secret for the absorption charges makes us insanely tanky on a way stricter budget. In the ultra late game, could you consider going increased scaling through Mahatma's teachings and Spirit Offering? We can reach over 150 to 100 million damage by this method. I've said no Animate Guardian, but maybe we do actually end up running Animate Guardian. It definitely is strong, right? And we are a minion build, so it would feel kind of silly not to do so. So yeah, do consider it. Also, if you have a truly insane wand with like +2 level of minion skills and a trigger setup where the autocast spells, there's also Stormburst as a possibility to basically get your stacks, which is fine. It's more so for bossing as you're not mobile, so you're getting hit much more, but I mean it does the job. And also like do experiment. There's like any kind of like defensive setup you can think of, we are supporting it, because we are supporting evasion, we are supporting physical reduction, we are supporting elemental reduction, we are blocking, we are spell suppressing, like whatever kind of setup like you can think of. If you have a crazy idea, a crazy solution, like this build probably endorses it. And as a closing thought, yeah, the build is strong, the build is powerful. The reason why I consider it mid-budget is because for as much damage as the Herald can do, for as tanky as we can never get both damage and speed. It's still like stopping and shooting, so this is why I think like other builds do surpass it, because like for instance Molten Strike, I would say that this build goes toe-to-toe with that and is actually better up until the 500 Divines range. For Molten Strike, I mean, if you see in the corners POB, when he moves from the 500 Divines to the Mirror Plus version, Basically, in that transition, that's where Molten Strike outshines us. And it's not only because it gets to higher levels of damage, but also because it keeps getting faster and faster and faster and faster, which is something that we unfortunately cannot do, as we are limited by being a minion build and being beholden to minion AI, basically. But that's like a very generous endpoint to be surpassed by endgame builds, I would say. So it's fun, it's a kind of niche, it's strong, and I hope you will like it. So bye bye.